Laudetur Jesus Christus. Vatican and World News.
In the headlines this Friday, May 7th, the Church in India observes a day of prayer and fasting for an end to the coronavirus pandemic. The bishops of England and Wales welcome Pope Francis' message for the 2021 World Day for Migrants and Refugees, and a missionary collaborator in the Central African Republic is killed by a landmine explosion. In the Vatican, I'm Francesca Merlo. Indian Christians observed a day of fasting and prayer today for relief from the COVID-19 scourge. The initiative comes as the nation is reeling under massive waves of infections and deaths, with the healthcare system stretched to breaking point. Robin Gomes reports.
The Catholic Bishops' Conference of India, CBCI, called for a day of fasting and prayer today, the first Friday of May. CBCI President Cardinal Oswald Gracious of Bombay urged his fellow bishops across the nation to gather in their cathedrals or bishops' houses at around midday to pray. The World Council of Churches, WCC, said that the National Council of Churches in India and the Evangelical Fellowship of India also observed the day of prayer and fasting. Cardinal Gracious formulated a midday prayer service for today. At the end of his Mass this morning, streamed live on YouTube because of the pandemic, he reminded his faithful about today's observance of fasting and prayer.
Today, as you know, we've got the day of fasting and prayer, not only in the Archdiocese of Bombay, but the whole country. The CBCI has made a call, so every diocese will be having a prayer. And those of you who want to participate, I'll say the prayer around 12 noon, and then it will be put on the YouTube, the prayer service, about 20 minutes, 25 minutes, prayer for relief from the pandemic. The whole country is praying for relief from this pandemic. Many of you may not be able to join at 12 noon. This evening, at least say a rosary for that intention. The Holy Father has begun a rosary campaign all over the world. He began on the 1st at St. Peter's Basilica, and every day rosary is read. Join with the Holy Father, join this universal campaign every day for being freed from this pandemic, and today especially spend a day of some penance. If it's difficult for you to fast because you're working, so fasting and prayer, certainly pray for a relief pandemic.
That was Indian Cardinal Oswald Gracious of Bombay. I am Robin Gomes.
Japan today extended a state of emergency in Tokyo and 3 other areas until the end of May to stem a surge in novel coronavirus cases. But Prime Minister Yoshihide Suga reiterated that it was still possible to host the Tokyo Olympics just months away. The government had hoped for a short and powerful state of emergency would contain a 4th wave of infection, but new cases in major cities such as Tokyo and Osaka are still at high levels, Suga said, announcing the decision. Mexico's real COVID death toll is still almost triple of its federal government's official tally, according to a U.S. source. James Blears with the statistics and the details.
Mexico's government says that 218,000 people have died of COVID-19, simultaneously conceding that this is likely to be considerably lower than the actual and accurate figure. The Mexican health minister is at variance, putting the death toll at 320,000. The Institute for Health Metrics and Evaluation at the University of Washington concurs that Mexican authorities have staggeringly underestimated the genuine seriousness of the real crisis. Their detailed study indicates that 617,127 people in Mexico have already died from the virus. That's 183% higher than the official tally. It states that many pandemic deaths go unreported because those infected have died at home. Many public hospitals haven't had enough beds available to meet the challenge, while private ones charge huge sums which are way beyond the means of ordinary working people. COVID tests in Mexico are less than 51,000 per million. Deputy Health Minister and COVID czar Hugo Lopez-Gatell, who himself became infected and recovered, has called the tests a waste of valuable resources. Some Mexicans are trying to resume life as normal after more than a year of isolation due to intermittent lockdowns. Yet the younger age groups have yet to receive even their first vaccination. For Vatican Radio, James Blears reporting.
The lead bishop on migration for the Bishops' Conference of England and Wales, Bishop Paul McAleenan, has welcomed Pope Francis's message for the 107th World Day of Migrants and Refugees, saying they have a valuable contribution to make to society. Lydia O'Kane reports.
Migrants and refugees do not come to usurp our way of life. Instead, it rejoices in how they can enrich our society. Those were the words of Bishop Paul McAleenan, lead bishop for migrants and refugees for the Bishops' Conference of England and Wales. Speaking at the launch of Pope Francis' message for the 107th World Day of Migrants and Refugees, the bishop said Catholics should have a heart open to the world when engaging with these groups. During a press conference on Thursday, he focused on 3 areas affecting the human family today. The bishop said the decision of the United Kingdom to reduce its aid budget compounds the suffering of the world's poorest. He also mentioned the fact that nations engaging in the arms trade bring endless misery to those in places of conflict. Thirdly, the bishop on migration said, our contribution to the climate emergency results in droughts, disasters and displacement thousands of miles away. Setting out the Church's approach on the issue of migrants and refugees, the bishop said it opposes policies which seek to divide migrants and refugees into groups, some preferred and others rejected. He went on to say that agencies and charities on the south coast of England and in northern France provide material and moral support to those in greatest danger. Liturgies celebrate the contribution of migrants to the Church and society. The bishop also noted that technology is being employed in order to reach and embrace the undocumented during the current pandemic. Concluding his intervention, Bishop McAleenan stressed the importance of promoting the equal dignity of migrants and refugees. With the Holy Father, we encourage a widening of minds and hearts. With the circle of our society, room should be made for everyone, including migrants and refugees who seek a home among us. The 107th World Day of Migrants and Refugees, which has as its theme Towards an Ever Wider We, is celebrated on Sunday the 26th of September. I'm Lydia O'Kane.
In the Central African Republic, a missionary collaborator was the sole victim of a landmine that exploded when a car of the Catholic mission of Niem drove over it. Locals suspect that the mine was probably set by rebels active in the region, as Father Benedict Mayaki reports.
A vehicle belonging to the Catholic mission of Niem in the Central African Republic exploded on a landmine on Wednesday, killing a young collaborator attached to the mission and injuring 2 others, including a priest. The Niem mission is entrusted to the Congregation of the Sacred Heart of Jesus of Betharam. The congregation has been present in Niem for 30 years and runs a small hospital with an operating room and a maternity ward, as well as a kindergarten and primary school. Confirming the tragic incident, Bishop Miroslav Gukwa of Boa explained that Father Arialdo Urbani and one of the members of the mission were on their way to the village of Kolo to attend a school run by the mission. When preparing to return, they met another collaborator of the mission who asked to be taken to visit his sister, who was admitted to the mission hospital. Unfortunately, about 10 kilometers from Niem, near Zakao village, the car drove over a mine, killing the young man and injuring the 2 others in the car. Father Obani, who was driving, sustained serious but not life-threatening injuries and is in the mission hospital. The other collaborator also suffered minor injuries. Bishop Miroslav explained that the mission car was the 3rd hit by mines along the dangerous road between Niem and Kolo. He said that the first car to be hit by a mine belonged to a businessman and the second car was conveying Russian citizens. Local sources say that the rebels of the Coalition des Patriotes pour le Changement (CPC) have long been placing mines and improvised devices along the road between Niem and Kolo where the explosion happened. The Central African Republic has been facing sporadic surges of conflict since a violent takeover of power in 2013. The aftermath saw armed groups reach a multitude of peace agreements even as they continued fighting each other and endangering the civilian population. The situation in the country has worsened in recent times after the rejection of former President Francois Bozize's candidacy for the December 2020 presidential elections. The increased fighting in the landlocked country has resulted in a humanitarian crisis and has led to the displacement of over 2.8 million people, with many fleeing to neighboring countries. I'm Father Benedict Mayaki.
Escalating violence in the province of Papua in Indonesia has prompted church leaders in the region to call on the military and separatist groups to declare a ceasefire in order to find a dignified, humane, open and respectful solution to the crisis. Christopher Wells tells us more.
The church in the province of Papua in Indonesia is calling on military leaders and rebel groups to declare a truce to avoid the risk of escalation of violence in the region. Church leaders have expressed concern that a recent move by the government to add separatists to a list of terrorist groups could exacerbate tensions in eastern Indonesia. A note from the Diocese of Timika in Papua describes the decision as an unproductive move that could undermine the efforts of religious leaders to forge peace in the region. Separatist groups, including the West Papua National Liberation Army, have claimed responsibility for attacks on military targets, but have also been accused of attacking unarmed civilians. In April, the West Papua NLA ambushed and killed the military's resident intelligence chief, prompting a forceful response from the government. Human rights groups have raised concerns that the army will carry out reprisals against civilians in response to the assassination. Papua has been the scene of protests against human rights abuses and violations by the Indonesian military. In a letter sent to the Fides news agency, the Apostolic Administrator of Timika, Father Martin Cuayo, says church leaders in the diocese are deeply concerned about the recent violence and the response that has increased tension in Papua in recent weeks. He adds, civilians are the first innocent victims of clashes between rebels and security forces, and often innocent families are displaced or even victims of the crossfire. Father Cuajo says the local church is calling on both military and separatist leaders to show restraint and observe a ceasefire in order to find together a dignified, humane, open, and respectful solution. I'm Christopher Wells.
Pope Francis will once again be holding his weekly general audience in the courtyard of St. Damasus beginning on Wednesday the 12th of May, with the faithful able to attend in person. The Holy See Press Office made the announcement on Thursday evening, reporting what had been communicated by the prefecture of the papal household. Pope Francis, in keeping with anti-COVID health measures, began holding the general audience virtually from the library of the Apostolic Palace. Public attendance at the general audience had resumed beginning on the 2nd of September 2020, but in light of continued health and safety concerns, the decision was made to go back to virtual audiences from the 4th of November. When public general audiences resume next Wednesday, the faithful will be able to participate by entering through the bronze gates in St. Peter's Square. No entrance tickets are necessary, but the faithful will be required to observe health restrictions in force. In a meeting held virtually on Thursday afternoon, members of the Council of Cardinals shared their experiences of the economic and social consequences of the ongoing COVID-19 pandemic and discussed the Church's commitment to health, economic recovery, and the support offered to those most in need. After considering the current situation in their various regions, the members of the Council turned their attention to the forthcoming Apostolic Constitution, which will deal with the organization of the Roman Curia. A note from the Holy See Press Office explained that the Cardinals discussed the working methodology that will have to be implemented for the revision and correction of some normative texts after the new document takes effect. They also addressed several further perspectives opened up by the text under elaboration. The next meeting of the Council of Cardinals is scheduled for June of this year. And that brings us to the end of this edition of Vatican and World News. For more on these and other stories, we invite you to visit our web portal at www.vaticannews.va. You can also follow us on Facebook and on Twitter. My thanks go to Mario Scatton in studio. In the Vatican, I'm Francesca Merlo.